Ferrari just admitted the truth, and it completely changes how you see Lewis Hamilton's season. He is not losing because he is slower. He is losing because his car is missing around 25 horsepower compared to Mercedes, enough to cost him every straight, every lap, every race. But here is the shocking part. Fred Vasseur did not try to hide it. He exposed it, publicly, which means one thing. Ferrari knows exactly where they are losing, and they believe they can fix it. Because this is not just about raw power. It is about when that power disappears, at the worst possible moments. And if Ferrari solves that, Hamilton does not just improve, he becomes dangerous again. Stay with me, because what Ferrari is about to change could flip this entire championship. Subscribe now, because this is where everything shifts. At first, it did not look like a power problem. That is what made it so misleading. Hamilton was not struggling to keep up. He was right there, matching pace, fighting in the opening laps, positioning the car exactly where it needed to be. And for a moment, it looked like everything was working. Like Ferrari had finally given him a car to fight with. But then, something always changed. Not a mistake, not a bad strategy call, something deeper, something invisible. Because lap after lap, the same pattern repeated. Strong at the start, competitive in the middle, and then vulnerable on the straights, at the end of energy cycles, at the exact moment where races are decided. And that is where Vasseur's revelation starts to make sense. Because this is not about peak performance. It is about sustained performance. And Ferrari cannot sustain it. The SF26 can reach the level of Mercedes, but it cannot stay there. And that difference is everything. Because Formula One is not won in moments, is won in consistency, in the ability to deliver the same level of performance every lap, every straight, every opportunity. And right now, Ferrari loses that consistency because their system forces them into recovery mode earlier, forces them to give up power before their rivals do. And Hamilton feels it immediately because he goes from attacking to defending, from pushing to managing, from controlling the race to reacting to it. And that shift is what costs him positions. Not speed, not skill, timing. But here is where the story becomes even more revealing. Because this does not just affect lap times. It affects decisions. Because when you know the car will lose power later in the lap, you start driving differently. You brake earlier. You avoid certain moves. You choose not to attack because you know what is coming. And that is the real limitation. Not mechanical, psychological. Because once a driver anticipates weakness, he adapts to it. And that adaptation reduces performance even further. But this is where everything begins to change. Because Ferrari is no longer ignoring this. They are targeting it directly, not by chasing raw horsepower, but by eliminating those weak moments, by controlling when the car deploys energy, by making sure Hamilton never loses power at the worst possible time. And that is a completely different approach, because instead of trying to match Mercedes everywhere, they are trying to beat them at specific moments, the moments that decide races. But this is where the tension builds, because this only works if it is precise, if the system delivers exactly when needed, not before, not after, exactly on time. And that is incredibly difficult, because races are unpredictable, situations change, opportunities appear without warning, and if the system is even slightly off, Hamilton is exposed again. But if it works, then something very different happens. Hamilton stops reacting and starts controlling the race again. And when that happens, the entire balance shifts, because now he is no longer fighting a limitation. He is using it, turning it into something calculated, something intentional, something his rivals cannot easily read. And that is where Ferrari becomes dangerous again, not because they are the fastest, but because they are no longer predictable. But this is where everything leads to one critical point, the moment where this change is tested, where Hamilton pushes, without that invisible ceiling holding him back. And that moment will tell us everything, because if the power is finally there, when he needs it, then everything we have seen so far changes meaning. It was never a performance issue. It was timing. But if it is not, if the same pattern appears again, then Vasseur's words become something much more serious. Not a diagnosis, but a confirmation that this version of Ferrari still has a limit, and that Hamilton, no matter how good he is still driving a car that cannot fully fight back. Because now, everything starts to point to something even bigger. This is not just a performance issue. It is a structural limit. And that is the most dangerous type of problem in Formula One, because you cannot fix it with a small update. You cannot solve it with setup. You cannot hide it with strategy. It is built into the car, into the way the power unit behaves, into how energy is recovered and how it is deployed. And that is exactly what Vasseur revealed without saying it directly. Because when he talks about lacking power, he is also talking about lacking efficiency, lacking control, lacking the ability to keep performance stable across an entire lap. And that changes how you understand everything Ferrari has been doing. Because suddenly, all those aggressive starts make sense. All those early attacks, all those moments where Ferrari looks stronger than everyone else at the beginning. That is not coincidence. That is necessity. Because they know they have to gain positions early, before the system starts to limit them, before the power drops, before the advantage disappears. And that is not a sustainable way to win. That is a way to survive. But this is where the situation becomes even more intense. Because Mercedes knows it too. They see the same data. They feel the same patterns. They know exactly when Ferrari will lose performance. And they wait for it, patiently, lap after lap, until the moment arrives. And when it does, they strike. Not aggressively, not desperately, just efficiently, because they know the advantage will come to them. And that is what makes this gap so difficult to close. Because it is not just about being slower, it is about being predictable. But this is where Ferrari is trying to break that pattern. Because the new system they are developing is not just about improving performance. It is about removing that predictability. About making the car behave differently, unpredictably, strategically. And that is where everything changes. Because if rivals no longer know when Ferrari will drop power, they lose their biggest advantage. They lose timing. They lose control. And suddenly, the fight becomes real again. But here is the risk. Because removing predictability also removes stability. And stability is what drivers rely on. It is what gives them confidence. It is what allows them to push to the limit without hesitation. So now Ferrari is walking a very fine line between being unpredictable and being unstable, between gaining an advantage and creating a new problem. And Hamilton is right in the middle of that balance, because he is the one who has to trust it, the one who has to feel whether the car is consistent or whether it is changing too much. And that trust will define everything, because if he believes in the system, if he knows the power will be there when he needs it, then he pushes, without hesitation, without doubt. And when Hamilton drives like that, he becomes something very different. Not reactive, not defensive, but aggressive, precise, relentless. But if that trust is not there, even slightly, then everything falls apart, because hesitation returns. And hesitation, at this level, is everything. But this is where the story reaches its most important point, because now there are no more excuses, no more hidden problems, no more unknowns. Ferrari knows exactly what is wrong. They know where they are losing. They know what they need to fix. And that means one thing. The next phase of this season will reveal the truth. Not about potential, not about promises, but about reality. Because if the changes work, if the power is delivered consistently, if Hamilton can finally push without that invisible limit, then everything changes. Ferrari becomes a real contender. Hamilton becomes a real threat. And the championship opens up. But if they do not, if the same pattern repeats, if the same weakness appears again, then the conclusion is unavoidable. This is not just a problem. It is a limit, a ceiling that cannot be broken this season. And that is the moment every driver fears. Because once you know the car cannot win, no matter what you do, you stop chasing perfection. You start managing expectation. And that is not where Hamilton wants to be. Not now. Not at this stage of his career. So now everything builds toward one moment. The moment where Ferrari shows its true level. Not in theory, not in simulation, but on track. Because when the lights go out, there is no hiding, no managing the narrative. Only performance, only execution, only truth. And that truth will answer one final question. Was Vasseur revealing a problem or warning us that Ferrari is closer to a breakthrough than anyone realizes? And this is where everything finally reaches its defining moment. Because up to now, Ferrari still has one advantage: hope, the belief that the problem is understood, that the solution is ready, that everything we have seen so far is not the real version of this car. But hope in Formula One does not last long, because sooner or later, Reality arrives, and it arrives on track, not in meetings, not in simulations, not in promises, but in lap time, in race pace, in what the car actually does when everything is pushed to the limit. And that is the moment Ferrari cannot escape anymore. Because once Miami begins, everything resets. New updates, new system, new expectations, and most importantly, no more excuses. Because this is not just another upgrade. This is the solution they have been building toward. The answer to the problem Vasseur just exposed. The fix to the power loss. The correction to the energy weakness. The removal of that invisible ceiling. And that means one thing. This is the moment where Ferrari shows its true identity. Not potential, not promise, identity. But here is where the pressure becomes overwhelming. Because if they succeed, everything changes instantly. Hamilton stops managing, starts attacking, stops waiting for opportunities, starts creating them. And when that happens, the entire grid feels it. Because a Hamilton with confidence, with consistency, with power at the exact moment he needs it, is not just competitive. He is dangerous. But if they fail, if even after all these changes, the same pattern appears, the same loss of power, the same vulnerability on the straights, then something much bigger is confirmed. That this was never just a fixable issue. That this was never just about timing. That this car has a limit, and that is where everything shifts. Because once a limit is confirmed, it changes how a team thinks, how a driver approaches races, how decisions are made. Because now, you are no longer chasing victory. You are managing damage, maximizing what is possible, instead of believing anything is possible. And that is a completely different mindset. But here is the final layer, the one that changes how you see this entire story. Because Vasseur did not just reveal a weakness. He revealed timing. He revealed that Ferrari understands exactly where they are losing, exactly when it happens, exactly why it happens. And in Formula One, understanding the problem is already half the solution, but only half, because the other half is execution. And that is the part nobody can predict. Not the engineers, not the drivers, not even the team itself. Because when the lights go out, everything becomes real. The pressure, the expectations, the consequences. And in that moment, there's only one thing that matters. Does the car deliver? Or does it fail? Because if it delivers, then this entire story becomes something else. Not a weakness exposed, but a breakthrough revealed. A moment where Ferrari turned a limitation into the beginning of a comeback. But if it does not, then this is the moment where everything becomes clear. Not just for Ferrari, but for everyone watching. That no matter how good the driver is, no matter how strong the team is, no matter how close they seem, there are limits in Formula One that you simply cannot overcome in time. And the real question is, when that moment arrives, will we see Hamilton finally unleashed? Or will we realize he has been fighting a battle that was never fully winnable?